Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. How did the United States get so polarized as the race to replace Barack Obama in 2016 starts to take shape? We're talking with a man who's done some forensics on the matter. George Packer, staff writer for The New Yorker, 2013 National Book Award winner for his bestseller, The Unwinding, An Inner History of the New America. George Packer, welcome to Paris.
It's good to be in Paris.
When did the unwinding begin?
Things never begin at a particular moment. They take a long time. But in the book, I begin in 1978. It's a year when a lot of things that are now familiar began to happen. Deindustrialization, the loss of the big, heavy industry jobs in the Midwest, the rise of conservative politics. Newt Gingrich came to Congress that year. It was 2 years before Reagan's election. The rise of information technology with the Apple II computer as the first popular personal computer. The decline of labor unions really began right around that time. And the rise of lobbying in Washington as a huge influence with money like we had never seen before beginning to pour into politics. So a lot that today is the landscape we live in was just starting to take form in the late 70s.
So you throw into the wash a palette of characters, the son of a tobacco farmer from the New South, a single black mom from the industrial Rust Belt in Ohio, and a young idealist who leaves Wall Street for the Washington Beltway. How have they come out of it?
You know, they all have gone through tremendous, and in the book I follow them in their lives from the 70s until the present. They've had to reinvent themselves over and over. Tammy Thomas from Ohio lost her job on an assembly line in Youngstown, one of the last blue-collar jobs there, and she became a community organizer and had a whole new career in midlife. Dean Price owned a chain of truck stops in North Carolina and Virginia, and then couldn't compete against Walmart and Exxon and turned to biodiesel, to alternative energy, and began to try to make a career as a kind of Johnny Appleseed, spreading the good news of green energy in North Carolina. And Jeff Connaughton went from politics as a Joe Biden aide in the 80s and 90s to lobbying, made a lot of money, and then became disenchanted with lobbying and went back into government with the Obama administration to try to rein in Wall Street after the 2008 financial crisis. So all of them have been sort of surfing on the waves of these tremendous transformations, sometimes going under, but always pulling themselves back up. And I think survival and resilience are a big part of the story that I'm trying to tell here.
And what is amazing is that through thick and thin, they keep that entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah, there's something deeply American about these characters, especially Dean Price, I think, who believes so deeply in his own ability to do well, to succeed. And there's a current that I call magical thinking throughout the book and throughout our American life, which says, if you believe in yourself, you can do anything.
Yeah, there's this weird mix of reading the Bible and self-help books.
And Oprah as a kind of goddess of self-help, Jay-Z as an example of how to make it coming from nothing. It's a somewhat dangerous idea, though, because it really puts all the responsibility on you, and it doesn't acknowledge that there's this thing called society that can deal some people such blows that really they can't make it on their own.
Now, American history is made of vast pendulum swings, and that's always been the case. And going from isolationism to a nation that's much more engaged with the rest of the world. How's it going to go in 2016?
It's a very clear election to me, because the two parties are now so different and so set in their own views that there's almost no middle ground. The candidates
Is that new? Is that there is no middle ground? There are no moderates?
It's been happening for a long time, especially on the Republican side. Republican moderates began to die off in the 70s and 80s, and today they're as rare as the California condor. Democrats have also been moving to the left, but not as dramatically. So today in Congress, there is nowhere for senators who used to be the statesmen and to be responsible and kind of custodians of national interests. There's nowhere for them to compromise, so they can't pass legislation. And I think next year what we'll find is, the two candidates, whoever they are, whether it's Clinton and Bush or others, will try to occupy that little bit of central ground that is left. But honestly, their own parties will pull them to the left. Democrats are more Elizabeth Warren's party today than they are anyone else's. Republicans, Ted Cruz, who's a very far-right figure, is kind of a mainstream Republican at this point. So with such polarization, the country was going to have a very simple choice, and we've been divided now for a long time between red and blue.
Hillary Clinton appears as a minor character in your book. She's one of these figures, though, that has sort of been on one side of the argument and the other when it comes especially to the issue of deregulation of the economy, the way it's become today.
This is one of the ways in which we've become more polarized. In the 90s, when her husband was president, there was a democratic view that we have to let Wall Street and business be more free in order to produce jobs and to have more wealth for everyone. Well, in the 90s, it sort of worked a little bit. Today, that doesn't hold at all. Wages are flat. Inequality is out of control. It's grown more than in any time in our history since the late 19th century, the robber baron era. So Hillary Clinton cannot go back to the 90s and say, when my husband was president, everything was good and we need to get back to that, because no one believes in that anymore on the Democratic side. She needs to remake herself as a more left-wing figure, and that's sort of the indication we got from her video announcing her candidacy.
And you talk about an unwinding. Can Barack Obama's healthcare policy, for instance, be unwound when you look at the way things are going?
Yeah, that was that was the most important piece of legislation, domestic legislation, since the 60s. The Republicans rightly saw it as an attempt to solidify the Democratic Party in power and to create a program that could not be changed, like Social Security, which was very unpopular with Republicans and others in the 30s, and they tried to end it. We're in a different time now, and I think with a Republican president and a Republican Congress and a Republican Supreme Court majority, yeah, it could be undone. It could be undone in June with an important Supreme Court case that will be decided then that could overturn a key part of that law. So nothing is stable in our politics because it's so extreme.
So extreme, and so the way you describe it, there is no more pendulum swing in America. It's just becoming more and more polarized between isolationists and non-isolationists.
Well, the pendulum has been swinging in 2008, the Democrats swept into office, presidency and Congress. 2010, the Tea Party, it was a reaction to Obama. It took a big chunk of Congress. 2012, Obama wins re-election comfortably. 2014, the Republicans come back and take the Senate as well as the House. So there is a swing between the two extremes. But what's different, what's strange to me is that the country is the same. It's not as though voters are changing in their views. They're fixed in their views. The question is, who votes? Which parties voters come out? And in 2008 and 12, the Democrats came out. In 2010 and 14, the Republicans came out. Next year, both parties are going to have to try to get their base out or else they'll lose.
All right, so the political model is called into question, but the economic model and this new economy where the Silicon Valley rationalizes, where industry outsources, nobody seems to be calling that into question.
Silicon Valley is sort of considered a magical kingdom where wonderful things happen and we're all obsessed and addicted to our devices. So that is almost off limits. People can criticize it, but not. But other sectors like Wall Street, the oil industry, those are fair game. And Wall Street is less popular now than it's ever been in my lifetime because of the 2008 financial crisis. And I think next year there will be a big battle over which party can claim to know how to deal with Wall Street. we are so unequal. There's so much wealth at the top, the 1%, that the Republicans have to address that issue. They can't ignore it as they've done in the past, but they have different solutions than the Democrats. The interesting thing is the way this economic inequality has led to political division. We're divided in both domains, both by money and by politics, but it's not always easy to predict how economic inequality is going to lead to political change.
All right, a lot of time left before those first primaries take place next January. George Packer, I want to thank you. The book is called The Unwinding, An Inner History of the New America. Thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
And thank you for joining us. Stay with us. There's much more to come here on France 24.